Hi friends, Mr. Wagner here. Today we're going to begin Breakout 1. So in this module I want to do a couple things. One is I want to introduce you to the notion of a skeleton of code. And this skeleton of code you can use for creating any Pi game that you want to use. It's nice because then you got a little bit of like starting code to work with. Okay. Second thing is I'm going to show you a better way to do colors than what we did in Pong. And the third thing is I'm going to introduce to you the notion of the clock and frames per second to make our games work a little bit better. All right, so without further ado, here we begin. So when I start a new project, I always put some comments at the top. And I like to explain what I'm doing and who's writing the code. So I might type in Mr. Wagner and maybe the date and maybe down here what this code does. So sort of get used to writing in comments. Remember, they're just for you because the computer doesn't care about them at all, but they do help you remember what you were trying to do. Okay. So let's, first thing we need to do is we need to import Pygame. There's import Pygame, and then we are going to also do from, let's see, Pygame.locals, import star. Okay, that gives us all the little Pygame things that we can reference later. And then Pygame.init. Probably a good thing. No Pi games can work without initializing all the stuff that needs to be initialized. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and create some variables called screen height equals 800, screen width equals 600. Okay. And we are going to do Pygame.set caption breakout. That sets the title of the window that we're going to be writing our game on. And screen equals Pygame.display.set mode screen width Okay, there we go. So screen width, screen height. Now, one of the things I like to do, notice how screen width and screen height is like capital screen, capital height, and I've stuffed them together. That's actually called camel caps, and people write variables like that because it's easy for us humans to read. Okay, so use camel caps when you want. So line 18, next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on defining our main game loop. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to type in game running equals true with a capital T, and then we're going to say while game running colon, just like that. Now notice how the words true and while are in purple. And the reason that is because those are Python keywords and you can't use them for anything else other than to mean true or while, okay? And in fact, if you were to type in true with lowercase, it doesn't make them purple because you can use that word true, but that's just gonna like confuse you, okay? So make sure true and false are in capitals and also make sure that they are purple. So this is the beginning of our game loop. The first thing we want to do in our game loop is we want to we want to check for events, and specifically the quit event. So when we click on the red X on our window, it closes nicely. So we're going to do this. We're going to type in for event in pygame.event.get parenthesis colon if event.type equals two equals pygame.quit capital letters game running equals false with a capital F. Okay. Now, I had some questions from some students where they were talking about equals versus equals, okay? In the case of equals, a lot of times you find them within like an if statement, and equals basically means is equal to, okay? And in the case of equals, just a single equals, that equals means gets, okay? So in other words, game running variable gets the value false, okay? Game running variable gets the value false, okay? Okay, so one equals is a comparison operator, and the equals sign just is an assignment operator, okay? You'll get used to that, so don't freak out if that seems really convoluted, okay? The big thing is like if you're in an if statement, you're going to want something like equals, okay? All right, so the next thing we're going to do, we got to do two things to get a screen to pop up. First thing is we need to color the background of the screen. So we're going to say screen.fill, and we have to give it an RGB value. So I'm going to say 128, 0, okay, now that's just some color. Remember that first number in that tuple is red, the second one is green, and the third one is blue. That was all explained in the Pong videos, okay? But so that color is red, green, and blue, and since the red is 128, it's kind of like a light red, okay? And then we're going to type in pygame.display.update, just like that. And then at this point, we are out of the while loop. Okay, that's our game loop. And line 29, I'm going to say print game over. And then we'll do a pygame.quit. All right. So that right there is the skeleton of every Pygame that is needed, you know, that you'll ever write. Okay, so you can always start with this like base code, and then go from there, which is kind of nice. Now let's try running it and see if we got any errors. Oh, let me move myself down here. Run module, unmatched parentheses. So sometimes you're going to get messages like this, and we got to figure out what's going on. And it says unmatched parenthesis right here on line 16. And it looks like I have two closed parentheses and one open parenthesis. So let me drop another one in there. And then we'll try running again. Okay, we have one here that says Pygame has no attribute set caption. pygame.set caption. Oh, I forgot a little thing. Pygame display dot set caption. Run module. Screen width is not defined. Did you mean screen width? Now notice here my typing is wrong, and that is because on line 13 I misspelled that. Okay? W-I-T-D-T-H. So let's get rid of that T, and we'll hit run again. And there's our screen. Now notice our screen is tall and skinny. I believe that's because we have screen width and screen height reversed. Okay, so I do. I have screen height as 800, screen width as 600. So let's change our height to 600 and our width to 800. And we'll go ahead and begin again. Boom, much better. Okay, so at this point, now we have a really good skeleton to work with, and let's see what we can do. So remember, going back, the second thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to discuss colors, okay? Now, a color in Python is basically a tuple of a red, green, and a blue value, RGB value, somewhere between 0 and 255, each one of those values, okay? And that's what we did in Pong, and that worked out really well. But, you know, Pygame is like all over the place, and there's lots of different colors that people can use, so there's really gotta be a better way. And fortunately, there is, and that is this. We can type in, instead of that tuple, we can type in Pygame dot color with a capital C, and then just put a name in here. Okay, let's close that out. Now we hit run, and we have a nice black screen. Now let me show you something really cool. If I change black to like deep pink, all lowercase, and run that, I get this really pretty pink color. And it turns out there's lots and lots of different colors. Let me change that back to black. Turns out there's a lot of different colors that you can use. And all those colors are the same colors that were defined by, I don't know, the internet elders when the web was being built, to make HTML web design easier, okay? And you can look those colors up. I'm gonna show you a website right here, HTML color names, and I'll post this in the list. But here's all the HTML color names that are supported by all the browsers. So there's black, there's cadet blue, chartreuse is a green, deep magenta, dark gray slate, deep pink, that's one of my favorites, lavender blush, etc. You see how many of these are, okay? So that's kind of cool. Now, those names are all defined with those colors in this file that's actually part of Pygame. Now, you don't really need to know this other than that this file exists, and I'll put a link in here for this. But if you see here, all these colors are here. So like the color blue is 00255. That last 255 happens to be the alpha variable, and you don't have to worry about that. But so say for instance, I wanted to get magenta 4, that would be the color 1390139. So I could actually just type in magenta 4 in my code and it would work really nicely, okay? So that's colors for you. I thought you would find that interesting and perhaps a little bit easier to work with, because you know, there's a lot of colors that you can use. So feel free to play with colors, feel free to mess around with that. I think it's a lot of fun. All right, enough said. So let's move on. The final thing that I want to explain in Breakout 1 is the notion of a clock. Okay, now Pygame, there's lots of different computers out there, okay? There are fast computers, there are slower computers, there's mobile phones, there's all kinds of stuff. But I want my Breakout game to run and look pretty much the same as if I ran it on a different computer, like say one at work or say one at school or something like that. And the way that Pygame and other gaming engines deal with that is they create this thing called a clock. Okay, so let's create a clock for Pygame. And it's pretty easy. We type in clock equals Pygame dot time dot clock, just like that, with a capital C. Clock Pygame time dot clock. Okay, and we're going to create one other variable, and we're going to call this FPS, which stands for frames per second, and we're going to give it a good value of 60. Kind of arbitrary, really. And then we're going to use this clock right after our Pygame display.update, and we're going to say clock.tick, and we are going to say FPS. Okay. Now, what this does, okay, and this is going to take a little bit of thinking, is every time this while loop goes, it gets all the way up here to update, and then it goes to figure out, do I need to wait a little bit of time before I draw my next frame in the game, okay? Because the limit of frames that I want in my game is 60 frames per second, okay? So if it's gone on this while loop and it's gone really fast, but it needs to slow down a little bit, it will insert a little bit of a time delay in that, okay? So let me say here, we're gonna say for every second at most 60 frames loops can pass, okay? And I can also do a print here. Let me do a print, and we can do a clock.get FPS, okay, get FPS, and we can see that frames per second is happening. So we're gonna, well, let's go ahead and hit run. And you'll see, like here, 60 frames per second, okay? So it'll just sit there and do that. Let's close that. I'm gonna go ahead and comment this out because we really don't need to see that. But I did want you to, you know, sort of understand that exists. All right, so let's stop there. Go ahead and type the code, make sure it's working, and let me save this. Oops, what did I click? File, save. Let's stop there, and I will see you on Breakout 2. Peace.